Hello, folks. This is Founder Laerun. I'm here with LadyShel, and we have a guest with us, Rob, and we are in the FGC chat. We're going to get started on building a character from scratch. This is going to be used out of the SRD. So if you don't have the player's handbook or you don't own much content, this would be a way that you can practice using Fantasy Grounds. You're not going to have all the fancy options that you'd get from all the other official sources. However, you can practice how to use the interface, and you can build your own if you know how to do it. But we're going to build a Dwarven Cleric. She's going to be of the Life Domain, and she will be a Hill Dwarf. So we don't have a lot of options to use, but we will definitely build her from the SRD, and we'll add a little bit of extra stuff at the end if we have time, and that'll be about it. So we'll stay tuned, folks. We'll be with you shortly.
Yep.
All right, everybody. This is Founder Laerun, and I am here with LadyShel. It's been a while. We're going to do the character build with Fantasy Grounds Unity. We are basically just using the SRD, which comes with the 5th edition rule set. In order for you to follow along or to actually create anything, you probably need a subscription or a regular standard license or above. In my library, if you go over to the library tab and you open that up, I have the core rules opened up. I have a map thing here, and then I have a couple of our modules that we use for creating classes and such. But the SRD comes with the 5th edition rule set. It is a system reference document. It has a pared down bestiary. It has the data, which comes from basically like a player's handbook basic. And then you have some magic items you can work with. So that's what I have loaded in the library. I have a map module in case, and then I have our character creation 101 and an effects coding class module. So that's what I got loaded in the library. We're going to focus on basically building a brand new character. Like I said earlier, we're going to do a female dwarf cleric from the Life Domain. We'll build her up to level 3. She's going to be a hill dwarf, and those are the options that we're limited to in order to show you how to build the character. So if you're also using the SRD, there won't be a whole lot of options. So we're going to have to be an acolyte. We're kind of locked in to what we're going to have to make. However, if you keep messing around with Fantasy Grounds and you play with it, you will eventually learn how to use it. So it's a good way to start to understand how Fantasy Grounds works. The background image here, we use an acronym to help us remember how and what order to build the character. If you're using the wizard, you can kind of avoid this, and it'll let you, do any sort of order you want before you commit. But if you're not using the character wizard, it's ABRC. And what does that stand for, LadyShel?
Whoops, sorry. Gotta remember.
A battle-ready character.
Battle-ready. Yeah, that's it. I was looking for my graphics while you were saying that.
Okay. So, yes, ABRC, if you remember that acronym, it'll help you remember the order of creation. Like I said, if you're going to use the wizard, the character build wizard, which is if you go to the characters button and you look at the bottom right, there is a import button, there is a add item, and then there's a edit list. And on the top left, there's the character wizard. So if you pop that open, it'll bring up the character wizard. And you kind of build this any way you want, for at least initially. And then when you're building the rest of the stuff, it pulls it in. But sometimes this thing is buggy. It's still in beta. So I use the older method, and that's the way I'm going to show you. This method here, it's great to get started quickly. But it doesn't tell you or show you or even notice. You won't notice if something's broken or not until you're done building. So I prefer to use the older method. So that's just me. But I'm used to using the old way. Once this wizard is fixed and does what it's supposed to, then I'll start using it. So for the time being, to create a character the old way without the wizard is you click on the green plus button, and this will load up a blank character sheet. And I'm going to close the character class window. I'm going to bring the character sheet over here on the left, and I'm going to drag this down. And I think I'll leave the graphic open so you can see what I'm doing. So I'll move that over. Okay, so there's different ways to generate your ability scores. So that's the first thing we're going to focus on. You always add your ability scores first. That is just the way it is in Fantasy Grounds. Some of you might think that's backwards, but that's just how it works for the rule set in Fantasy Grounds. So normally people will use a point buy, or they'll just hand enter the content in here depending on what we're working on, or they will use an online calculator. You could set all these to 8 manually and then use an online point build system and just enter the numbers. Or you can roll, and that's what I'm going to do. So there's 2 ways that you can do this. So there's a command that you can type into the chat area. So it's /die, which means to call up the dice, with a space in there, and then 4d6, which will basically take 4 6-sided dice. And then you can either go D1, which is drop the lowest, or K3, which is keep the highest. It's basically the same thing. So down here in this graphic, these are the same. These will do or achieve the same thing. Another cool thing is when you type this in the chat, there's no space between the 6 and the D, by the way, for the D1 or the K3. It's all one phrase, just like I have over here on the right. So when you do that, it tells Fantasy Grounds to roll the dice, and it has the ending there is basically the syntax. It tells it to drop the lowest or keep the highest. So what it's going to do is roll for you, and you can click on a shortcut now. If you drag and drop the actual text before you hit enter, you can actually drag your formula or make a dice pool if you want in the shortcut. So down on the bottom left in slot 2 and 3 on my desktop, I have both of those. So I'm going to roll the first set just to show you what it looks like, and you can do it in rapid succession. So there's 6 rolls, and that's not too bad of a score, honestly. I mean, that's decent. So that's one dice rolling method. Now, method 2 is the same thing, except for it's going to keep the highest 3 instead of dropping the lowest. So, see, that one gives you a lot higher stats, but look at that 6. So this one's actually not that great. I would actually pick this first one. Dealing with that 6 would be a little rough. But the 8 doesn't bother me so much. But anyways, those are your 2 different methods of generating dice rolls. So if I'm going to use this first set of dice, which I'm going to use, I can just drag and drop the numbers from the actual chat onto the character sheet. So I'm going to focus on probably on the wisdom and maybe a little on con, because the dwarf normally gets a bonus on those anyways. So you don't necessarily have to drop your highest number. So I'm going to put 13 in the con area, because that's pretty decent to start with, and when you add the dwarven bonus, it'll be decent. I'm going to take one of the 15s and put it in wisdom, hands down. For the 9, I think I'm going to put that in charisma. I don't see this character being that much of a leader. And then the 11 will probably go in strength. 12 will probably go into intelligence. And the other 15 will go into dex. So that's a pretty good start. What do you think, Shel? I don't know if you're on, but...
I am, but I was typing.
Oh, okay.
I think your character's not going to be able to wear chainmail or scale mail.
Oh, because of the
strength.
Oh, good point. So maybe I'll switch those around. If you want to wear heavy armor, like she said, you have a minimum of 13. And this Life Cleric actually does get a bonus to wear heavy armor. So that might be a thing. So I'm just going to redrag the 15 in the strength spot, and then I'll redrag the 11 in the dexterity spot. There we go. So that's basically how you do your stats, or you can hand type them, whatever you need to do. But this is a couple of different ways you can generate. And like I said, the formula is a /die, which you put in the chat area with a space, and then 4d6, and then you put the syntax at the end, which is either D1 or K3. So drop one, or drop the lowest one, or keep the highest 3. It's the same thing. So that is basically how that works. So I'm going to go to my graphics here. So what you're getting here is when you drop the lowest, you kind of get this bell curve here. So with the yellow is a 3d6, and the 4d6 drop 1 method is the black. So on average, your average roll, roughly highest roll, is close to 13 with a 46. When you do the old method of 3d6, it's closer to 10. So 46 versus 3d6, that's what you're getting. So a lot of people might know about it, some people don't, but that's basically what to expect when you're generating your scores, and that's just an average thing here. But what this shows us is that there's only a 10% chance to get at least 118 out of the 6 rolls. And to get, let's see, at least 2 18s, it's less than 1%. So it's fairly balanced. It's not too OP. I don't mind if players use that method. So this is kind of your breakdown, your percentages. It also shows us the average roll is roughly 16, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 9, which is close to the 16, 14, 13, 12, and 8. So it's pretty close to the D&D 3rd edition Elite array, and or a slightly boosted D&D 4th edition Standard array. So 16, 14, 13, 12, yeah, so that's pretty close. So that's what this method will provide for you. And then as far as... let's see. Let's see here. So this is basically the order we're going to build in. So ability scores, background, race, class, and then we're going to open this up to go to leveling, and that's where you would level up your character. So that's what we're going to do. So right now we've already done part 1 or part A here. Now we're going to go to B, which is to pick a background. Well, being that we don't have a lot of content and we're just using the SRD, I'm going to open up the backgrounds banner on the right-hand side. So that banner is going to be something that will only have the backgrounds from the SRD, and the SRD only provides the Acolyte. However, this would make a good template. So if you want to build your own backgrounds, just use this as a template. And then you'll start figuring out how Fantasy Grounds works. And all you have to do is actually drag and drop this back in and make a copy. And when you open it up, you can unlock it and you can edit this any way you want and rename it. But for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to drag and drop this onto the character sheet. And when I do so, it actually populates some of the materials here. It gave him 2 skills, or her, I should say, and it gave her her traits and the choice of 2 languages. So it does that automation for you, and it also tells you here in the chat what was added to your sheet. So you don't type that in. You actually drag and drop that onto your sheet. A lot of people, when they're new, think you need to type that stuff in. You don't. It's actually a part of the rule set. The drag and drop features is probably one of the nice things that can happen. So the race is the next step. So that's part 3. So what we're going to do is go over to the right-hand side, and you're going to open up the race table. And you're offered a lot of the standard races, but we're going to use a dwarf in this case to fit our theme. So if I grab this and drop it here, it automatically gives us Hill Dwarf because that's the only one it features in the SRD. If you had an official content like the Player's Handbook, you would have a few more choices in that. So this is just because we have the SRD. You're very limited on sub-races and such. So when we added that, it added the Dark Vision. It already did the ability score increase. So now we have a 15 Con and a 16 Wisdom. So it added +2 to Con and +1 to Wisdom. So that was pretty cool. It does all that automatically. And then it also, if there was any languages, which we had Dwarven and Common. And then we also have our Dwarven traits. So the traits are something that may or may not always be automated in Fantasy Grounds. Because there are so many different varieties and changes between the different types, it would be very difficult to code or to turn these into actionable features. So you have the Dwarven combat training. So that gives you proficiency with Battle Hammer and or Battle Axe and Warhammer, and you get Light Hammer and Hand Axe. Well, if you look at the character sheet when you actually build your class, it will list what you get for your class. But if these are not listed there, especially the martial weapons, then you have to manually add them. So I'll leave that up and over here. Dwarven Resilience is basically you get advantage on saving throws against poison. So if you click on ADV before you roll your save, that will work. And then you have resistance against any damage that makes it through that saving throw. So in that case, if you don't have it coded, your GM could just cut it in half, just basically click on half before you roll damage, or you can do that as well. And that will basically perform like resistance. The other thing you can do is code it on your character sheet, and we'll kind of look at that kind of stuff later. But this is another trait that comes up when you're building your characters. So elves and dwarves have like this combat training that you have to look at, and then any of their sub-racial abilities. Dwarven Toughness, this is baked into the rule set. So when you build this character, it's automatically going to add +1 hit points every time you level up. So it's already active, and you don't have to do anything with it. It adds another extra hit point as you level up, and it's every level. And then you have the Stone Cunning, which is basically you get to double your proficiency bonus on any history skill checks that have to do with masonry or stonework or even natural rock formations. So there's a couple ways to handle that, and I'll show you that later. But you can make a skill called Stonework and just give it a double proficiency, or you can make a code that temporarily goes on your character, and when you make the roll, it expires. So there's a couple different ways to handle that. And then on your abilities here, you have some tools that you are proficient with because of your background with these tools. So you have 3 choices: Smith tools, Brewer's supplies, or Mason's tools. So I'm going to notate right now. She is going to take Smith tools. So that's just a notation. I don't have to do that, but it helps my game master realize what I chose when I build a character. And that's a kind of a courtesy thing. So that's already been dealt with, so I don't need to leave that open. And now the last and final piece of this is going to be the class and level. So you have this little magnifying glass that's next to your proficiency bonus. So if you click that, you get this window that says class and level. And then you come over to the right-hand side and you will pick the classes banner. And as you can see, I have a few classes that I can pick from the SRD. I'm going to pick Cleric. And the only Cleric domain thing that you can get out of the SRD is the Life Cleric. So when we pull that over, it's going to make it force us to make that choice. If you have official content like the player's handbook, you will not have that issue. So it just depends on what content you have. So in this case, when I drag it over, I won't have any pop-up choices except for skills. So that's another thing to keep in mind is when you pick your class or your race or whatever, it might ask you for a skill. So go to the skills tab, and I have insight and religion, so I don't want to pick those. There's nothing that'll stop you from choosing those more than once. If you use the character wizard, it helps you avoid that. But if you're building it this method, there's nothing that prevents Fantasy Grounds from having you double up on things. So Fantasy Grounds does not prevent you from doing anything. So if you don't know the rules or you're new to Fantasy Grounds, that's something you want to keep an eye out. So basically, I'm going to drag over the Cleric, and when I do, it'll prompt me for 2 skills. And I already know which 2 I don't want to pick, are Insight and Religion. So I'm going to go ahead and grab and drag and drop this into this field. And here are the skill pop-ups. So you got to be careful with the pop-ups. When they do come up, you need to find them. Sometimes they're behind things. If you accidentally close it, then you're manually going to have to go in and add them. And it's not the end of the world. It's just kind of a pain. So I don't want Insight and Religion, so I'm going to go with History and Medicine. I think those are decent. Or maybe if you wanted Insight or something like that, but I think we're good there. So it adds those automatically to your sheet, so you become proficient with the little star next to your character sheet. So that is the basic of building Fantasy Grounds. So it's ability score, background, race, and then class. If you get that part right or correct, the rest of this process was going to be a lot simpler and a lot smoother, and it's less likely to break. So that is the main piece of Fantasy Grounds that you need to learn. In the player's handbook, it tells you to build your character a different way, and a lot of that is because it's designed for the tabletop. It does not have virtual tabletop in mind. So when you build in Fantasy Grounds, it's good to keep to this order, and if something breaks, you'll notice right away what it is instead of just randomly building. You do not type in anything in these fields. These are automatic when you drag and drop. There are some things that you have to edit manually, but for the most part, everything in the first part of the character building is drag and drop. Now, from here on out is going to be customization and choices, which is not as bad as trying to fill everything out by hand. So you have different tabs on your character sheets that we'll go through shortly. Are there any questions, Shell, in the chat, or are we good? We got about 10 minutes before we go on.
Any questions right now?
Okay. So the next step is basically to start going through these tabs to get an understanding of what they are. So we're on the main tab, and we're in this pop-up window. And in order to level up properly, you can effectively drag the cleric back over and drop it in here or onto this line here onto class and level. But it's so much easier if you just grab the class link. So if I click on this, this is actually the link that has the description of this class. It has all the tables, the spell slots. So that's something you're going to want to bookmark. So I already have it bookmarked in the slot 9 down here. So that is something that you should bookmark so you don't have to keep coming all the way back here to grab it. The next thing is to actually level up. So all I'm going to do is grab this little shield, or it might be a dragon's head or a skull or something, depends on the theme you have. In this case, it looks like a little round buckler shield. So if I grab that and just drop it right back into the same box, it's going to level up. So it's very simple to level up, provided you have the content available. If you don't have the books loaded when you level up, it can break your character a little bit, or it'll give you a warning that says that you don't have the book loaded. So it's a possibility. So be careful when you're building your characters. Make sure the content is available in your library and when you level up. So that was a level up. Now, it's very important that the Game Master consider actually exporting the character before you did the level up process. So at each level, before you go to the next level, it's a good idea to export the character from the character management window. That way you have a backup. So you have a backup for level 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And keep them all in one folder. Keep their little artwork in there and their token, and you'll be good to go. So now that we're second level, it does add a couple traits on the sheet here. You get the channel divinity and all that stuff, and there's other traits that you get. Now I'm going to go to level 3, which is the max that we're going to go to. And it's going to be the same process. I just drag and drop this over and right back into this box or this class and level window. And there we go. So everything has been added automatically for level up. So your features that come with different levels will be added. And if you have any other things like hit points, and those things are added too. So this character at 3rd level has 27 hit points. So 3 of those hit points were bonus points for being tough. So I can get rid of this toughness. We already know that she's got those. And then as far as this class and level goes, if you play by the rules as written, at 3rd level, you should be starting around 900. And to get to 4th, we need 2700. Now, some people don't use this. They'll use milestones and such. But if you're going to play, the regular way with experience points, that is where you should be for this particular level. Now, you can multi-class, but I would not encourage that when you're a newer player or if you don't have the content. It's a lot harder to deal with. There's some regulations and stipulations when you lose some functions of your main base class when you dual class or multi-class. Okay, so that is basically how you build your character and how you level up. The level up process, like I said, you want to make a copy of that or have your game master export the XML file before you drag over your new level. That way, if you make a mistake during your process or you grab something wrong, you can go back and you won't have to fix, 7 levels worth of your character sheet, just 1. If you get to level 9 and you actually drag over the wrong thing, that's a bummer. So just a little cautionary tale there. So I'm going to go ahead and close the class and level window. We're done with that. And on this character sheet next to the AC, this is your combat calculator. So this has any dex adjustments, whether it's positive or negative, or maybe a magic item. Then your speed comes from your race, and then there are some cases where if you're a certain class and you're not wearing armor, you gain speed, or maybe you have a ring of speed or something. It would add to your overall speed of movement. And then you have your base of 10 as armor. Any armor you'd wear would reflect here. If you have a shield, that gives you a +2. And if you have any dexterity bonuses, this will indicate what your range is. And then if you're a monk or a barbarian, you get to choose a secondary class to gain bonuses from, or a secondary ability score. And then, of course, the miscellaneous is just for permanent adjustments. If it has a little check by stealth disadvantage, it's usually because you're wearing armor that's heavy or bulky. And it usually will check that off automatically. So I'm going to leave that open while we're building a character. So that's what that is basically gives you an idea of where the numbers are coming from. Most of the stuff on here is static. You can adjust some of the things on here, but like your hit points, you can technically go in and change those. And then you have your death saves and your hit die rolled down at the bottom. So this is just an overview of the character sheet. So this magnifying glass opens up class and level, and this other magnifying glass opens up the combat calculator. And these values will change as we give this character equipment. So any questions out there, Shell?
Not yet.
Okay. I think we're going to take a stop and take a break, but what file do you keep in a folder in regards to character, as you said? Okay, never mind. Yeah, Arborhawk, I export the XML files. So if you're going to level, I would go ahead and export those as the game master. It's an XML file of the character. You want to aptly name that so that you'll know what the file is. So I'll make a folder on my hard drive, and then I'll export the character at each level. That way, if someone breaks their character, or if you want to play that character in a different game at a different level, you can. And then you keep your any artwork or your notes or anything in the same folder. And that's just being organized and complete. Now, you don't have to do that, but I kid you not, at 7th level, if your character is leveling up and not paying attention and they drag the wrong thing over, you can't go backwards in Fantasy Grounds. You can only go forward. Unless you're using the character wizard, and even then, at the end of that, you still have to commit. So that just gives you a more of an opportunity to change things before you commit to them. But nonetheless, when you go to the character manager, that is where you would export. So if you go to characters and you hit the edit button on here, you'll get an arrow on all your characters that are in this campaign, and you can hit the down arrow and it will prompt you to save it to your hard drive. Vice versa, if you want to import a character, if you click the import button, it's going to pop up with another window which will allow you to import any characters that you have in your campaign, even if they're not from the same game. The other option is if you hit it again, it will actually allow you to select an XML file and pull it into your game. Now, if you don't own the content and you import a character, it will allow you to, but when you go to read the descriptions or when you go to look at something on the character sheet, it'll give you an error message that tells you that you need to have the book loaded. So you got to be careful when and where you build your characters. Now, if you don't care about that, so be it. But if you're trying to cheat the system and saying, well, I don't need the books, well, you won't need them initially, but when you go to level up or when you want to read a description on a spell, you won't have access to it unless you have access to the player's handbook. So that's how that works. Okay, got it. So we're going to take a quick break, folks. We'll be back here in about 5 or 10 minutes, probably just 5 minutes, so we'll be right back. Bye-bye, folks. We'll be back. All right, folks, we're back. So we just took a short little break, answered a question live in the Discord. But the next step is going to be the second tab here, which is the skills tab. You can add extra skills if you need to. And at first level, in most cases, if you do not have 4 ability scores or more in your skills, then your character's broken. So at first level, you want to check that. If you have at least 4 skills, you're good. If it's more than 4, that's fine, because some classes give you more. But if you only have like 2 or 3, then you somehow doubled up, or you didn't select the skills that you were given from either your background or your class. Once in a while, your race will give you a skill as well. So what we're going to do is add a skill, and the reason we're doing this is because I have the smith tools. So normally you probably won't use this a lot during gameplay, but if you do downtime activities like repairing armor or creating stuff, it's nice to have this roll handy. Or maybe you do a assessment on someone's armor, like after a battle, you say, yeah, that's going to need to be repaired or whatever. So the tool proficiency skill can be added as a rollable skill. So what we do is at the bottom, on the bottom right corner, is the edit button. Once we hit the edit button, we get this little green plus button up here on the top. If you click on that, that gives you your ability to hand type in something. So in this case, I'm going to put tool : smith tools. And what this does is it just lets people know and yourself that you are proficient. So you click on the little star next to it, that automatically adds your +2. In this case, it's your +2 proficiency bonus. So that's what's nice about putting it on here. And then you have to select what ability score it's based on. I think this could be Constitution or Wisdom. I'm just going to say Wisdom. I think it could be either or maybe even Strength. But I got it on my Wisdom score, so I let my players pick whatever score makes most sense. If they can explain it, I'll allow it to happen. And then if I click that, then which is getting out of the edit mode, now I have a rollable skill. So if I double click here in the cell, it'll now roll as a skill tool mod roll. So if you're going to do some crafting or repair or whatever, that would probably be something you would roll for your game master. So you can add additional things here. And I was telling you earlier that we can add the stone cunning skill here. This is one way to do it. So you can add stone cunning or stonework. That's what I'm going to call it. And I'm going to be proficient with it. And it's based on history, so history is an intelligence check. So I'm going to change this to intelligence. And the trait itself says, whenever you make an intelligence history check related to the origin of stonework, you're considered proficient in the history skill at that point, and you add double your proficiency bonus. So in order to do that, I turn this to 2 stars instead of just 1. So that would be something you could roll against any sort of challenge or knowledge that has to do with your actual stonework that you're looking at. So that's one way to handle this. There's another way, and I'll show you that later. So that's how you add a custom skill. And if you're a player and you play the character a lot, you want to drag and drop your common skills in the hotkeys. So in this case, this is a Dwarven Female Cleric, Life Domain Healer. So I'd probably take Medicine and drag and drop that roll down to the bottom here, and then maybe Perception. So I'm dragging the dice roll, not the description for the item. And now instead of coming here every time I need to roll those, I can just click once in the chat and it'll roll. So that's just a little tip for players to make things a little quicker. So now when you go to the Abilities tab, these are the things that I need to deal with and look at after you've done your initial build. So we have a proficiency called Life Bonus Proficiency. It says when you choose this domain at first level, you gain proficiency with heavy armor. Well, if you look at your proficiencies down here, it says light armor, medium armor, shields. So we have to add this. And spelling does matter. So heavy armor. So now when I add heavy armor onto my character sheet as an equipped item, I'll be proficient with it. If not, then you suffer the bonuses from, or the penalties from it. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. The Dwarven Resistance, you can handle this manually as a game master. If you know the Dwarven character has these, you can accommodate for those manually with dice rolls and clicking on advantage and stuff like that. But in this case, if you want to notate it, you could drag and drop it onto the sheet. I have a character that's already made as kind of a template. So when you go to add Dwarven Resilience, you could drag and drop this on here, and it'll give you the title, and it'll give you the name, but it's really not going to give you any of the coding. Some abilities will, some won't. Depends on how they're written. So in this case, this must not be written the way it should be, otherwise it would probably parse. So what you'd have to do is have something more along the lines of an actual coding. So in this case, Dwarven Resilience, this is already coded, this one on this sheet. So if I drag and drop that on here, I will have two different variations of it. And this one actually has the coding on it. So you'd have to right click and add your own coding to it, whatever it does. So in this case, it's an effect. Then you would put in all this stuff here. So this is an effect that is both a note and it does something physically, or it actually automates. So it's set to self. It has a title with a semicolon, and then it has in capital resist, colon, or semicolon, or colon poison. And then it has a note here after with a semicolon that says advantage on saving throws versus poison. Unfortunately, that cannot be automated in this, but you can click advantage before you roll your saving throw. But the resistance part will work. So if you take damage from poison, it will resist it, and you'll get advantage on your saving throws. So there's some benefit to having that there. So that's how you would, basically how you would code this. And then this powers area, you could call this like your set of powers. We'd call it racial traits. And once I type that in there, it still thinks I'm editing the cell, so it still says powers. But once I click away from it, it actually will update the header. So these are my racial powers. So I'm going to actually drag this over into here, and I'm going to delete this because it's not where it goes. And then this one up here, this one down here that doesn't have any coding, I'm going to delete that. So you can learn how to write these correctly so that they will parse. And then what this will do is when you're on the combat tracker, in this case I already have this guy on here. When you go to your combat and your actions tab, you can actually click on this stone cunning, or this, in this case, resilience, and it'll be on the combat tracker as a note. And if he comes across poison, it'll automatically apply the resistance. So there are some things that you can automate. There are things that you can't, and some that you can. And knowing what those are is going to take a little time, because you have to know all the little class variations and those sort of things. So anyways, I don't want to get too wrapped up in that. The next thing is to go through the skills, which we've done. We're going through the abilities. Channel Divinity is basically your basic power that you get from your god. So you get Turn Undead as one. So that's automatically something that would need to be added to your sheet as a class feature. So there again, I have that dummy sheet. And on the dummy sheet, it has the channel divinity, the preserve life, all that stuff. So these are things that can be coded, or you have to handle them manually. So what this has is a saving throw and a condition. So if the undead that you target do not save, then you can click the undead turned, which is basically like frightened. And basically that gives them a condition where they're supposed to move away from the party. So that's just it doesn't mean they're going to automatically do that, but it is an effect. And it's a condition called turned. So it gives them disadvantage and stuff like that. So anyhow, that's a trait that you would have to add manually, even though it's listed here. It's not going to resolve it manually. You have to, or automatically. You still have to deal with it, just like you would a pen and paper game. So you have Channel Divinity, and one of the abilities is to turn undead, and the other is to you get this Disciple of Life, which is automatic. So you'd have to add this into your spells. So we'll do that later. But this is where you would adjust how much your healing does. So it's 2 plus the spell level. So all of your healing spells would have a +3 bonus. And then as you level up, the spell level goes up too. So if you have a higher level healing spell, it's really going to start adding up. So now the next thing is the Channel Divinity Preserve Life. So when you cast this, you can basically you get an extra healing. You can do it at 5 times your level. So this one would get 15 points of healing to work with, and you could spread it out amongst your group. So this is something that would have to be coded on your sheet as well. Divine Domain just explains domain spells and what bonus spells you get. And like the Life Domain basically tells you get Bless and Cure Wounds as freebies, so they don't count against your daily total of being prepared. So that's just what that is. And then you have your Shelter of the Faithful, which gets overlooked quite a bit. But if you're in the right conditions at the right place at the right time, you would get basically hospitality for at least you. And if they share your religion or something like it, or if they're like kind of residents, they will help you find either cheap or free lodging. So that's really nice, and you can stay at certain temples too for free or for a reduced amount. And then there's a spellcasting trait, which just defines your spellcasting. So the bonus proficiency life, we had to add that heavy armor. So when we build this character and we want heavy armor later, if we want to get like half plate or something, we could. So the next thing is your inventory. So this can be very time consuming. I don't recommend doing this right before a game. There's a lot of things. So that comes from your background and your class. So for instance, the Acolyte. If you come down and you scroll down on the background, you have your feature. It tells you what you get. So you get a holy symbol, you get a prayer book, you get some clothes, you get your vestments, which is your robes and stuff, and a belt pouch with 15 gold. So you'd have to manually come in here and hand type in whatever gold you get. And then the equipment, you have to go to the items area. And when you open that up, you would have to search for this stuff. So if I went to prayer book, okay, there's just a book, and you drag and drop this stuff as you go. So I'm not going to take everything on here. I'm just going to give them as weapons and armor. So I'm going to give them chainmail. We changed it to I don't remember. I don't think so. I think it's 13 or higher. One questions I have was in regards to books used. Say a player uses something from Sword Coast, but then use the main player handbook, say 5th level. Will Fantasy Grounds warn of using the wrong book. Now, it usually will just use the book if the feature is available. It's when you have a class feature or something that's not available, it just won't put it on your character sheet, and you won't know it until you start playing. So no, the answer is it won't tell you. However, if it does add something that does require a book and your character tries to access the content and it's listed on your character sheet, it's not going to do anything but give you a warning. So it'll ask you to load the proper book. But as far as building your character using the wrong book, no, it doesn't prevent anything. There's no warning at all. The only warning you'll get is if you try to click on, like, say, the class feature, it either won't be there, or if it is, you won't have access to the text. So that's something that you have to look out for or be aware of. Okay, so now the next thing is I'm just going to add just the weapons and the armor, but there's a lot of other little things like clothing and backpack and all this stuff. But for the sake of time, I really don't want to do all that in this session. It's just take too long. But I'm going to go ahead and grab a light crossbow. And you need the ammunition. And I'm also going to grab a shield. And just for aesthetics, maybe a helm. In most cases, a regular helm doesn't do much. It's just excess stuff, basically. So there's the prayer book, the chainmail, shield, and the weapon. So now a warhammer.
Don't forget your case for your bolts.
Yeah, we're not going to do that because of the time.
Okay.
I mean, I shouldn't even, just because it's going to take forever. I'm not going to add all of that. So basically, one thing I forgot to do was the Dwarven combat training. So when you have that proficiency, you have to add battle axe and warhammer to your weapons. The other two are already light weapons. So a light hammer and a hand axe are already covered under the simple weapons. So in order to use the battle axe and the warhammer from your heritage, you need to add those manually to the list of your proficiencies. Because normally clerics can't use that. And also elves are the same way. So if you have an elven wizard, they'll still be able to use a long bow, long sword, short blade, and a short bow. So you have to add those manually. And the languages down here, you have to pick a couple of them. So he picked Goblin and Giant. So he wants to be able to speak the language of his enemies. So he has those just in case he has to deal with them. So that's basically the type of customizing you have to do. And if you have any feats, they go up here. Drag and drop those up here. So this sheet here is probably the most cumbersome for most newer players, because you have to know what's automated, what isn't, what you have to add, what you need to leave. So those things take time to learn. You're not going to learn those overnight. So that is that. And now that you look at my sheet here, the armor class of 6 with a shield bonus of 2. Now, why is the armor? Oh, it's plus 6. So 10 plus 6 plus 2 is 18. So that's what it, and we have disadvantage because we're wearing heavy armor. And to answer Shel's question, she asked if you can use chainmail because of the strength. So if you open up the actual item itself and you look at here, it will tell you usually what your strength is. In this case, it doesn't. Oh, that's the shield. Let me look.
It's 13. I looked it up.
Okay. So what she's saying is she looked up this, and it says strength 13 for your bonus, or in order to pick it up and use it, that you have to have a 13 or higher. Now, Fantasy Grounds won't stop you. You can put it on still. It's just not playing by the rules, and it might give you disadvantage, even though you already have disadvantage. And that's what this little disadvantage on stealth button's for, is when you put on armor like that, it's bulky and heavy, it'll check that off. So whenever you make a skill check, so I'll roll for her skill check. So for stealth, if I roll, it'll automatically be at disadvantage. Yeah, so it rolled a 19 and 11. It dropped the 19 and kept the 11. So it automatically knows. So if the item itself is built correctly in Fantasy Grounds, it'll parse that. It'll look at the attributes of the item, and it will apply disadvantage if it's applicable automatically. So that's kind of a cool thing. Now, there are some cases where your shield cannot be used when you're using your weapons in different situations. We'll go over that. And then the resilience, we've already dealt with that. Preserve life, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the disciple of life. And then there's the background for the character. And the so that's where the items came from. And then these personality bonds and flaws and ideals, we'll put those on now. So this is going to be a female. I'm not going to worry about her height and weight and age right now. Her size is medium, and she's going to be lawful good. Now, Shel, do you remember why we have to put that on there?
So that if you're using a spell like protection from evil or protection from good, or detect good or evil, that it knows your alignment.
Exactly. So that does have to be on there for the sake of the spells that use protection from good and evil. It parses that. It looks at that. Same with your size. If your size isn't there, you're probably broken, or you didn't pick your race. That determines the size of your token when you put it on a map, how it auto scales it. So, well, usually a small or medium creature only takes 1 square. If you're large, it takes 4 squares, and so on and so forth. So
and your alignment has to be in the proper case, like you did on yours.
Yeah, you don't want LG or no acronyms, and you don't want it misspelled. So that's important. She does have a deity, and it's Baranor. Or Baranor, am I spelling that right? Baranor True Silver?
Yeah, Berranor, I believe.
It's on that graphic. Let me pull that up. So I have an image that I made. Yeah, so Berronar. So Baranor True Silver. So her deity is a Dwarven deity. She's also known as the revered mother of the Mother of Safety. Baranor was Moradin's bride, and as such, the matriarch of the Dwarven pantheon. So this is supposedly going to be this character, and this is her domain and who she worships. So I put that on here. This is more lore. It doesn't do anything mechanically, but it gives your background a little bit more juice. And then the roles themselves are tables for the personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. So you can drag and drop these if you don't want to roll. If you want to pick something, you can just drag the text. But let's say on the ideal, you weren't sure what to pick, so you're just going to roll. And it says that whatever it picks for you, you can drag and drop that from the chat area. So this is just something that you can do, either roll or pick. So that is just something that that you'll get used to in your building characters. So you can pick these, you can make up your own, whatever you want to do. So these are just some of the things that you get from her background. If you pick a religion and you have content that gives you a religious background, you can also pick that and add it to this, or you can swap it out for what's here. So this is just a real basic idea of what your character's like, and then it explains the features and such. So then your background equipment comes from, or your class equipment, it comes from your class description. And if you scroll all the way at the bottom, it tells you what types of things you get. So she picked a Warhammer, if proficient, which she is. She picked chainmail, if proficient, which she is. She has a light crossbow and 20 bolts, which we've already done. And any simple weapon, so the light crossbow or the Warhammer, you can do that instead. A priest pack or an explorer's pack, and a shield and a holy symbol. So the holy symbol and the shield, they are not accessible from some of the content in here. So you either have to make it yourself, or you have to load the player's handbook, and that actually has that in there. But
is
it's
the
not
amulet in there? Because
no.
usually I change my amulet into a holy symbol.
It's not in the SRD.
Okay.
But the SRD doesn't have it physically in the equipment. But if you have the player's handbook loaded, you have all that stuff, reliquary and all that good stuff. So then you have your divine domain, which explains, which gods you might pick, and then there's your bonus spells. So we'll deal with that shortly. So this class description gives you your progression and your spell effects and all that good stuff. So you see any other questions yet?
Nothing in Twitch, and actually nothing in Discord either.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see anything either. I'm looking at, I guess this is most.
I looked at YouTube earlier, and there wasn't anybody there.
Just one guy. Yep, just one dude. All right. So now what we have is to further this character, and then we've done some of the background. Encourage your players or yourself to create a little bit of a backstory and use the note section. And if you want to describe your appearance, you can do that. So if you said stumpy,
does she have a beard?
Exactly. So you could take this and drag that over to your chat window. So if someone asks what your character looks like, you already have it ready. So you can just drag and, usually you can copy this, but for some reason they may have changed it. Because you used to be able to copy this text. It looks like they don't. Yeah, you have to hit Control A and Control C and then Control V. And then you would, put that up there in the chat. All right, so another thing we should do is probably pick her actual portrait. So if you double click on here, it brings up this little bag. And then you get this assortment of bags that comes with Fantasy Grounds. And then there's a fantasy group. So while it takes it a minute to go through those and allow for you to pick through them. But basically those are things that you would choose from as far as your portrait goes. You can make your own, but you'll have to give that to your game master and have them put it in your directory, or you can send it to him and he can add it to his. Okay, so I'm just
keep it small.
Yeah, keep it small, like about 100 by 100, maybe 200 by 200 max. And you want it square. You don't want something that's not square. So I'm just going to use this female. That's a gnome. What do you know? I'll just use that for now. But if you want a token at this point in Fantasy Grounds Unity, you cannot add a token as a player. So if I ask my game master, hey, I want a better token, or instead of just the portrait, the game master has to go into their assets, into the data folder. Excuse me. The data folder would be your higher level. In this case, I have one in my campaign level. So this is
under tokens, though?
Yeah, I got to go to tokens. There we go. So I would drag and drop this as the game master into here. So this is now my token. So your portrait becomes your token if you don't have a token. If you do have a token, your game master has to drag it here. And if you don't like the token, you can always drag the portrait back over and it'll replace the token. But in this case, I'm going to put that back. So now when you put this on the combat tracker, it will show the token instead of the portrait. So I'm going to give her a name. What name should we give her?
How about Amberlynn?
All right, so now when we put her on the combat tracker, she'll have the token instead of this portrait. And then once we build the character up, if we have time, I might run a real quick little turn the undead type thing. So anyhow, the base equipment's on here. It's equipped, except for I don't have the helm equipped, but she's not wearing it right now anyways. And I have a couple extra things, but chainmail, the crossbow bolts, the crossbow itself, the shield, and the warhammer. So those are the main things that you have to have on your sheet. All the rest of the stuff is more to keep track of weight or just to have that on there or to keep track of the quantity. So we already dealt with the notes area. The log sheet is for Adventures League. So if you play in Adventures League, you would click on the add item and then you click on the little shield. You put in your session number, the name of the adventure, it would go on top. You put your DCI number in there, the session number, and all your goodies for your session. So that's how you keep track of Adventure League stuff. And then if you go to the Actions tab, this is where most of the time you're going to be playing with your character. So immediately I'm going to change the crossbow bolts to 20. That's what I have. And it'll put the ammunition here. Crossbow bolt's going to be two-handed weapon. Warhammer can be switched. So if you use it with one hand, you can use your shield. If you use it with two hands, you should come back and at least unequip the shield, which is kind of a hassle, but you'd want to unequip it until you recover it. Now, for the sake of ease, you can actually make something to stop that from makes it simpler. So if you're going to use that two-handed and you're going to, basically put your shield away, you can make an effect that'll do that. So I have my character sheet that's already, he's already built basically. I have an effect that I created that will offset the shield bonus. It does not change the character sheet. It doesn't change this number. It just changes the math. So when you add this drop shield action, which is something I made, it will basically take that in consideration. The syntax is remove shield bonus. It's AC:(-2), and it's set to self. So what happens is when I get in a combat situation, and I'm going to use that two-handedly, this will be combat and actions. Instead of going to my inventory and disabling the shield, I'm just going to click on this button. And it's going to put that on my character as a penalty, or at least an offset to the shield bonus. Once I recover it, then as the player, I can go to the effects that I put on myself, and I can remove it. So it depends on the situation. So if you're using the hammer one-handed, you can use your shield. If you're using the warhammer two-handed, which will do more damage, you need to remove the shield bonus. I think a lot of people forget that. And as far as the rest of this goes, all this stuff on the back here is customization. So for racial traits, I would probably just drag over the ones that would apply to you. If you have these coded, you make little groups for these. So these are the racial traits. This one actually isn't, the shield drop. And then you could make other types of locations. Like I made an area for my life domain spells because they're always active, they're always available. But in my other spells here, I just have a certain set. Because they're always active, they're always available. Okay, so now that we have that, now what we're going to do is start building the actions on here. So we get Bless and Cure Wounds as a bonus spells to our Life Cleric. So they don't count against the daily total. They're always prepared. We also have the class features for the Life Domain Cleric. So I'm going to make that group. And how you make a group is down here on the bottom. You would click on the edit button, click on the star, and that adds a new empty group. And I'm just going to drag over these features so I don't have to look them up. So they're all ready to go. They're coded already, and they already have the syntax that's needed to automate as much as possible. So this spell here is set up as a bunch of different variations of healing in case you need to just use 3 or 10. So it has a whole bunch of different rows of healing buttons. And then this Turn Undead, right now it says a DC 8. That's not quite right. So I'm going to open up the power group and I'm going to manually select this to Wisdom. And now the DC is 13. So you got to make sure that it's parsed. And that's what it did. It now knows to pull from the Wisdom. You don't have to do that manually, but sometimes it just doesn't do it. It won't parse over. And then your channel.
The only time that it does it is if you've got level 1 spell, level 2 spell, or cantrips. If you make any other type of power group, it's not going to add the ability change at the top.
Correct. So I'm going to make a domain for Life Domain for the spells. These are my bonus spells. So again, I'm making another group by clicking on Edit. And I'm clicking on the star, which makes another power group. And I'm going to call this Life Domain Spells. The only reason we do this is to keep it separate from your regular spells. They still work the same. They still take slots, but they're always prepared. You don't have to do anything, prepare them or anything. So there's one, and then there's Cure Wounds. And then I'm going to get rid of the placeholder. So right now, these are set up as an ability. So if I go to this Life Domain here, I want to change it to Spells. And then the ability score is going to be Wisdom. That way it pulls on the correct stat or the correct base. In this case,
you get
Wisdom.
2 extra bonus spells at level 3 since your character is level 3.
It
would be oh crap, I can't remember.
So here's the bonus. So it's 2 plus 1. So you get 2 for a first level spell. You get 1. So your bonus is 3. So I've already calculated those. So any healing spells that are first and above, you get the Life Domain bonus. So any healing spells are going to add a little extra onto it. So being at 3rd level with the first level spell, you get 3 altogether because you get 2 as your base and then 1 point of healing per spell level. So if it was a 2nd level spell, it'd actually be a +4 instead of +3. So that's already dealt with. I already did that on this sheet, so I don't have to redo all that. But you go into the properties of the spell and you open that up. And you would add the bonus if you're a Life Domain Cleric in the bonus area. And then when you actually have another 2nd level spell, this would actually be a 4 instead of just a 3 because of the spell level. So that's basically a bonus that you get for being a Life Domain Cleric. That's one of your features.
Your 3rd level bonus spells are Lesser Restoration and Spiritual Weapon.
Right, but I'm only 3rd level. So I only can cast.
Is 3rd level.
Right, I can cast, oh, that's right, yeah, the bonus spells. I thought you were talking about spells themselves.
Nope.
Okay, so the other ones were, what did you say they were?
Lesser Restoration and Spiritual Weapon.
So I'm opening up the spells banner, and you said they were level 3, so I'm going to go to level 3, and then the source.
Well, they're level 2 spells, but you get them at level 3 for your bonus.
Right. I see what you're saying. So I'm going to go to level 2 spells then, and then I'm going to pick Source as Cleric. And you said Lesser Restoration.
Right, and Spiritual Weapon.
So those, I hate it when it does that. And Spiritual Weapon. So I got to put these in the Life Domain spells, but they are because they're second level. So that's what they're doing. They just made another group called Second Level Domain. Huh. Interesting. And then these would also be Wisdom based, and they already are, so I don't have to change that. And let's see, is it spells? Yep, that's right. And now I get to pick 3 cantrips. So I'm going to select this to nothing and leave that on Cleric. So these are the level 0. So I guess Guidance is one of them. And I'm dropping these on the spell slot area. That way they'll go to their own area. I don't have to guide it necessarily. And then what was the other one? Why did that go in there?
I hate when it does that.
I probably didn't drag it properly, so when you drag, you need to make sure. There it goes.
The other one was,
these are cantrips.
Sacred Flame.
Yeah, so we have a kind of a buffing one, and then we have a damaging one, and then maybe Guidance, or we already have Guidance, maybe Light or Thaumaturgy, or Spare the Dying. There we go.
Spare the Dying. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, but it's a cantrip. We don't get the bonus for that, but it's still useful. You got range on it. So that's your 3 cantrips. Sometimes you'll get a bonus cantrip if you're a certain race or a certain class and such, but in this case, no. And then all the spells that I actually want for 1st and 2nd level are already listed on here, so I'm just going to pull them from here instead of the spells list, just so you guys know what's going on. So this character's already built. I already built this to help me make this a little quicker. So all the spells that you get off the spells list, I've already put on this character. But to drag these over, you just drag them up here where it says spell slots. So all the 1st level spells, I'm just going to drag them up here. Make this a lot quicker, because I've gone through and sorted the ones I want already. And clerics are not limited to how many spells they have access. They're only limited to how many they can prepare per day. So I'm just dragging the popular ones from this list here. And that makes my job easier, because otherwise you're going through a big spell list and picking them out. And I already have spiritual weapons, so I don't have to worry about that. Lesser Restoration, did I already grab that? Yeah, I can delete that. So what I've done is I picked something I already have a bonus spell in. You don't need to do that. And as you can see, the spell save DC is not right, the Wisdom DC. So if you open up the power group and just open this up and make sure it has Wisdom in there, it'll parse after that. So I didn't change anything. I just opened up the power group, made sure it said Wisdom, closed it back up, and then it fixes all the DCs. Some reason it doesn't always trigger itself. I don't know why. You might have to close the character sheet and reopen it or something like that to get it to do it. But it drives me bananas because sometimes it doesn't. People won't notice, and then they'll go, "What happened?" Okay, so we have basically that's the build of the character. So we have the spell slots, we have racial traits, we added some class features, and these are things that you'd have to code as well as the racial traits if you know how to do that. We do offer classes here in the college, so if you want to come to Fantasy Grounds College and start asking around and looking for how to do it. Also, there's content out there where it does it for you. So it just depends on what your requirements are and how much time you have or how much money you have. That's what it boils down to. So now that I have the character built, I already have Amberlynn on here, level 3. It's got a token. All her stuff's filled out. She's got her majority of her equipment. I didn't give her background equipment and her class equipment, but if you wanted to, you could do that and then add the backstory. And at this point, when this character is done and I play it for a while, before I go up to 4th level, I want my game master to take my token, my portrait, and also the XML file and put it in a folder for me. So that way I don't lose track of it and I have a backup of it. And if I want to play in a different game, I have different levels of that character that I can play. Okay, so the next step is to go ahead and let's test some of this out. So to test a character out or an NPC, they need to be on the combat tracker. So if something isn't working right, put them on the combat tracker first and then check it out. We found that out the hard way before, where we were doing all these changes and we're wondering why it wasn't working. Well, they weren't on the combat tracker, so that has a lot to do with it. Okay, so now that we have this on, I'm going to go ahead and throw this character on a map. So this is a sample map, and when you are a player, your game master has to put you somewhere in the map. And I put this other guy in here. This is her buddy. He's going to watch the door. So the door now, this door here is open. It doesn't go anywhere, but it's open. Now the Amberlynn. When you first put them on the map, if you're in play mode, which is generally where it defaults, you won't see a whole lot. It'll be kind of darkened out. But once you take possession, which means you click on your token, you'll start seeing the line of sight. So that's basically why you wouldn't see that, because the line of sight is active right now. Now, Amberlynn wants to check this place out. They heard that there were some problems in here. There was a lot of goings-ons. So she's kind of wondering what's up. So basically, I'm going to move her to the, let's see, wrong character. Okay, I'm going to put her on the right-hand side. And I have her on the Actions tab. And one thing you need to do with your spells is when you go before you play, go into preparation mode and you're going to prepare the spells that you want to use. So she's going to have a couple more of these. There we go. Okay, and then you're going to go to combat and action mode. This is the mode you want to be in when you're playing. So she's going to move 25 feet. So to do that, he's going to move here and here. And when the DM approves that, it'll slide up to the location. Okay, so here's some like clickety sounds on the left. So I have an encounter prepared. There's some skeletons. So if I open the encounter up and I hit the down arrow, now the skeletons show up on the map. They're still not visible, but she heard them coming around the corner. And then I turn on this eyeball, which makes them visible, except for this one. He's behind this open door. So she doesn't know that he's there. She might hear him, but she doesn't see him. So that was her turn. She comes around the corner. She sees these guys. Now she has an action that she can perform. She can't do any more movement. So she's going to summon her what is that? The spiritual hammer. But she's going to do a cantrip first. So she is going to cast Sacred Flame.
You don't think she'd turn undead?
Yeah, well, she can. I just want to show the spell, though.
Sure.
So she's going to do the casting. So she's going to cast it on this first character, or this first skeleton. So this is her action. This is a cantrip. So she's going to drag and drop the saving throw first, or in this case, it's an attack roll. That's nice. So she successfully blasted him with some flame, and then all she has to do is drag and drop it on the skeleton. Wow. So she cooked that guy. And now she's going to take her bonus action, which the Spiritual Hammer is a bonus action. So she did a cantrip, and now she's going to do a bonus action spell. She gets to place it within 30 feet of her. So what I would do as a player is right-click on the map, pick on the pointer, and then in this case, it'll draw a little circle. So I'm just going to draw a little 5-foot circle. And that circle inherits the color of her dice. So to make this show up better, or as a player, you can change the color of the dice. So right now it's kind of a brownish color. So I'm going to make it like a bright pink color so you can't miss it. And then change the text to black so we can see it better. So this is now her, this would be her spiritual weapon if she was the player. So if it didn't take effect. So if I go here, click on that, click OK, now it took effect. I didn't click on OK. So her hammer is there. She's going to direct it right here and attack this skeleton. So the spell itself has its own attack roll, a cast. And she was able to hit him with the spiritual hammer. And it wounded. It took five points of damage of force. So that was her turn, basically. She tells her friend that there's some skeletons or some undead up here. That's her turn. So now the skeletons can go. So this one that's hidden comes out from behind the doorway. And since he has to go through his ally, he's going to lose 10 feet. So, thanks. So basically, in order for me to emulate the movement, I have to hold the control key. So he was back here. And I take this and move this here. And here. That's as far as he can move because he had to go around the door and through this other skeleton. So that's his turn. He doesn't have he has a short bow. So maybe he attacks her with a short bow. So if I hold down the right control key and click on Amberlynn, now you can see the distance. It's 10 feet. So the little short bow that he has, all I have to do now is double click on the attack roll. And that missed. So it went right to the side of her, over her shoulder. Or she raised her shield up in time and blocked it. I think that looks more dramatic. And that would be its turn. So now the next one would go. And this one might make it to her. So here is the attack. It's going to use its blade. This one didn't target her because he's using a melee weapon. Rolled a 7, so she was just able to kind of turn that blade aside. And that was its turn. And then this skeleton here, the one that's over here by the doorway, he moves down this way. That's his turn. He's not going to use his bow or anything because it's kind of the guy's kind of in the way. So that's the turn right there. So her friend is going to move up just in case.
Her friend didn't roll initiative. That's why he's so far down on the list.
So he moves up here. And he says, "Oh my God." He's like, "What the hell?" And he is going to use his light hammer. He's going to throw a hammer at it. He has a throwing hammer. So this is a bomb kind of thing or a hand thrown thing. So I want to make sure I use the right attack roll. Ooh, and he struck it. And let's see how much damage it does. Oh, he took him out. So he was already damaged from the spiritual hammer. And he took more damage from him throwing. He's hammered to death. So on the combat tracker, I can remove that combatant. And that would be his turn, basically.
That's because he's vulnerable to
bludgeoning.
Bludgeoning, yeah.
Yeah. Amberlynn is basically going to say, okay, enough of this. So she is going to do her Turn Undead. So on her Actions tab, here is the Turn Undead ability. So these guys are within range, within 30 feet. So the player is going to hold down the right control key and click on each one of these targets. And in the combat tracker, it says targets, skeletons. And if you click on the targeting icon as the GM, you can see that she has them targeted. Now she's going to roll the saving throw for them. So they have to save, let's see, Wisdom save of 13. So one of them failed, one of them saved. So now I'm going to apply the actual effect. So let's see how that works. So only one of them's frightened. This one isn't. So the one that's frightened is going to move away when it's its turn. It's going to move away from the combat, unless it's struck. The skeleton number 1 is going to advance. And he's moving into range. And he's got his short blade. Ouch. So he actually hit her friend there, her dwarven friend. Ooh, ouch. So that hurt. He got jabbed with that short blade. So this one, now that it's its turn, can move away. Now, LadyShel, you get Amberlynn gets an opportunity attack against the skeleton, but she's going to let it go. Because if she hits it, then it breaks the trance that it's in, basically. So it's moving away. And then the dwarf here is going to retaliate against this one. So he's going to, let's see. He's going to bring out his Warhammer. He's going to use it one-handed. And he's going to strike it. And he dropped it. So he tried to swing and missed, and his hammer went and bounced off the wall. Or it fell on the floor. So he basically lost his turn. So Amberlynn is going to control her Warhammer thingy. Her spiritual hammer. And she's going to command it to attack the skeleton. And while it's doing that, let's see. I think she's going to use guidance on this guy here. It's a cantrip. So she reaches over and says, "Be careful." And she touches him and applies the guidance to him. And then she guides her hammer over to this melee pile here. And it misses. So that's basically how the things go in the combat. So this is just a quick kind of overview of how the character sheets work and such. So hopefully, do you see any questions, Shel?
No questions. We got a couple new people in the chat. And somebody that was spamming some stuff. And Drake said hi.
Hey, Drake. So that is basically just a really rough way that you would use the 5th edition rule set for the SRD. As you can see, you can do quite a bit without having actual books. You can actually play. You just have to know how to adapt. So that's basically the character build and then some. What we did is for a recap, what we did is we went and took and built the character accordingly. So what is the order that we build a character in, Shel?
A battle-ready character, or a BRC.
And what does that mean?
I said it first. I said a battle-ready character.
Right, but it's ability scores, background.
Oh, ability scores, background, race, and class.
That's right. So if you guys can remember that, your characters will turn out pretty good. All that other stuff we did in the middle and at the end was all customization. You get that first part right, that's really what's key. So yes, a battle-ready character. And the graphics that I had up earlier were just talking about dice rolls and you know where exactly we were getting into. So we have this graphic here. That's the ABRC. So if you remember that, that'll help you a lot. I hope you enjoyed this little quick thing. It was what, an hour or 2 hours or 1.5 hours. Not bad. So I think we'll call it a night. Don't want to go too much further. I don't want to confuse people. But that's basically how you build your character and get it ready for battle, I guess. So, Shel, do you have any comments or anything to say before we go?
Just wanted to thank everybody for stopping by, and I hope you found it entertaining and useful, and it helped you to make your own character.